having played at Rewind Scotland and North and gearing up to perform at Rewind South this coming weekend, which you may have guessed from our opening track, King in a Catholic Style, which was a hit in 1985. We are welcoming from China Crisis, Eddie London.
Hiya, Jackie.
Brilliant to have you with us, Eddie. We must say congrats to you and your musical partner, Gary Daly of China Crisis, on the 40th anniversary since the release of your breakthrough album, Working with Fire and Steel. I know you've been revisiting that time a lot as you've been constantly gigging. In fact, I think China Crisis have got to be one of the hardest working bands in the biz, because with most artists, when I sort of take a look at what they're up to, you can see a flurry of live dates or a particular tour and then, you know, a decent break in the diary where they sort of regather themselves. But when I look at your schedule, you're in a constant state of mid-tour. There is no break, ever.
Do you know what, Jackie? Our lives have been mid-tour. We've never really stopped. It's kind of a... It's just rebranded in a way because it's the anniversary and everyone, you know, like the 40th anniversary thing.
Yeah.
Well, when it isn't the 40th anniversary, we're still constantly touring and we're still, you know, so we've never stopped.
I know last year, when it was the 40th anniversary of the band itself, you celebrated with a huge UK tour and also a couple of very special shows at the Liverpool Philharmonic. And you're going back there again, aren't you, in November? You must be thrilled to be back there.
It's such a beautiful theatre. It's incredible theatre.
We should also let people know, Eddie, that in addition to that show at the Liverpool Philharmonic, your schedule is on Facebook. You're literally here, there and across the UK, of course, at Rewind South this weekend. So let's take a trip down memory lane right now then, Eddie, to when you were first getting into music as a kid. Do you have a clear memory of the very first record that you ever bought?
Well, Ride a White Swan. And to be perfectly honest to all your listeners, I think that's because it's a cooler one, because if I was dead honest, it would have been something like David Cassidy, Could It Be Forever, or something like that.
You would not be alone. You would not be alone, Eddie. We had Jim Kerr of Simple Minds confessing to Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep. So, you know.
Oh, I'll wind up on that next time I see him.
Could it be forever? Or is my mind just a rambling on?
It should be known it was Could It Be Forever by David Cassidy, because I remember it being on the Silver Bell label.
Right.
But round about the same time, you know, in them days, no one had much money or anything, and you kind of used to, what we used to do was, you know, the money that you were given for your dinner money to go to school and that.
Yeah.
We wouldn't buy dinner. You go to the market and you buy your records. And that's what we kind of did. So I did buy Ride a White Swan. I remember that being on a kind of, I think that was on the Fly label, because you can see I was really into labels at the time.
Well, I think that's one of the things, and I'm going to sound like a right grumpy old woman now. It's one of the things that maybe people miss out on. I know my own kids, when I try to explain it to them, sort of, you know, there's a lot of eye rolling going on. But there was something about physically having an album with liner notes and reading who produced it and who wrote it and who the special dedication was to. You learned so much. It was an education.
God, yeah. I mean, the main reason we signed to Virgin Records at the beginning is because we loved the logo. Do you remember that Roger Dean logo with the two Virgins back to back? Before it started doing its trendy little V, it used to have such almost like a prog thing, you know, because obviously it had Mike Oldfields and all them kind of people.
Yeah.
But we just thought it was such a cool label to be on. You know, look at this label, it's got a great logo, it's got great artists on it. You know, not what could they do for you?
But to be associated with something cool.
You're something cool, absolutely.
Write it out like a bird in the sky. Write it
It got to number 2 in 1970. Ride a White Swan by T-Rex, the first cool record that Eddie London ever bought. And we'll be back with more from one half of China Crisis next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, where it's just you, me, and tonight's special guest, Eddie London of China Crisis, cozying on in for a great conversation where we are taking a deep dive into his most meaningful musical memories. So, Eddie, let's go back to when you guys first got together. You couldn't have been better placed geographically in terms of the creativity around you. I mean, Liverpool was just an incredible hub in the 80s, wasn't it, for musicians?
It was indeed. Me and Gary, we actually we met at school, and it was the largest all-boys school in Europe. There was two, because it was a Roman Catholic school, so there was a lot of priests about, and it was 2,600 all boys. There was no girls in the school. It was absolutely huge. So that was the school we went to. We met there, and basically just sharing our love of music. And as you quite rightly say, it was the early days of OMD. It was the early days of the Bunnymen, the Teardrop Explodes. So you're quite right. It was, it was a hub of activity.
Under blue moon, I saw you so soon. He will wait until.
Number 9, in 1984, The Killing Moon, Echo and the Bunnymen knocking around Liverpool at the same time as China Crisis. So, do you have any particular memories of early days gigs, with your contemporaries?
Me and Gary would go to, do you remember a place called Eric's?
Oh, yeah. It was a legendary venue for all the burgeoning young musical talent around Liverpool at that point, right?
It was indeed, yeah. We'd go, we'd seen the Bunnymen and like the Teardrops there. And I remember me and Gary went together and we seen OMD for the first time.
Right.
And there was just Paul and Andy, and they had a tape machine that they had in the back. And we thought, hang on a minute, these are not a million miles away from what we're doing. There's the two of us.
Yeah.
We used a lot of synths and everything at the time. I mean, in them days, it kind of, because you're talking just post-punk, really. So, and there was a lot of technology being developed, where all the drum machines and all the synthesizers were really cool. So, to be dead honest, you didn't have to be an over-competent musician. You could just be a basic musician, like in the punk days.
Yeah.
To start writing songs, and that's what we did at the beginning. A lot of it was like, very simple songs, very simple, beautiful pop songs and that, like African and White and Christian and them kind of things. But they were still very, very, I'd say, naively beautiful in what they were.
Enola Gay got to number 8 in 1980 for Andy McCluskey and Paul Humphreys, who, of course, were orchestral manoeuvres in the dark. We had Andy on the programme, actually.
Good guy.
And I think he talked about those early days. And, he says when he looks back now, they were so into the tech and so into the music that they sort of...
Us too, us alike.
But they sort of forgot about the image, which a lot of 80s artists sort of were very creative about the way that they looked and things. And so, and he sort of, says he cringes when he looks at his wobbly dancing and his baggy cardi and things like that. Were you that bothered about the way that you looked as a band?
Oh, absolutely not. If you look back at us, we never had a picture of ourselves on the first 3 album sleeves. I would imagine that Virgin Records was so frustrated with us because they actually couldn't really pigeonhole us. We were from up north, obviously, and everyone knows it's raining, it's depressed, and there's unemployment, and so it was kind of grim up north, kind of thing with the Smiths, and we kind of look like that in our outlook. In a way, we'd have long coats on. And you got to remember at the time, you had like the Giranis doing Rio on yachts and things like that, you know what I mean? And Spandau Ballet and everyone, dressed incredibly, a lot to do with the image. And we were, let's say, more than reluctant to portray any image. I think we were just kind of shy kids at the time, to be perfectly honest. I'm focused more on the music than what we did on any kind of image. But nevertheless, it must have been very frustrating, for the record company and all that. How the hell do we promote these guys and they won't do anything about it?
And when you were starting to, it looked like you were going to get that deal, yourself and Gary, with Virgin.
Yeah.
Who was just ahead of you? Who had sort of, crossed that Rubicon and was starting to get some publicity, some exposure, was starting to get noticed on radio play, that you were thinking, oh God, we're nearly there, we want to be where they are?
At the same time, Virgin signed, I think it was the same year, they signed the both CCs, they signed China Crisis, and the other CC was obviously Culture Club.
Right.
And they went global, they went absolutely huge. They had, Do You Really Want to Hear Me Out? I just remember it being so successful. But, who was ahead of us? There was many. There was many ahead of us. I remember used to going into Virgin Records and we used to feel really disappointed because it was when it was in Vernon Yard, just off Portobello Road. And there was this, like you'd have like a thermometer, like the weather thermometer with the mercury in or whatever. Well, they had one of them in like the foyer there, which was huge. I mean, like, not like a little thermometer. It was like, like
life
2
size,
stories high, from the ground floor up to the... And it had, like, names on it, like Culture Club, Mike Oldfield, Phil Collins, and the thing that, like, the Mercury kind of thing or whatever would go up to the best sellers where, Phil Collins being at the top. And we'd be right there at the bottom of it going, oh, my God, look how far down we are. All these other artists are above us.
Give me time.
Number 1 in 1982, Culture Club, slightly further up the giant Virgin Records salesometer than China Crisis, apparently, but only just, because the boys were catching up. And we will be back with more from Eddie London of China Crisis next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, the home of great conversations with your favourite living legends of the 70s, 80s and 90s. Tonight, we're having a brilliant natter with Eddie London of China Crisis. And before the break, Eddie, you were talking about being signed to Virgin at the same time as Culture Club and having a sense of pressure to perform in terms of chart success. Did that pressure get pretty intense?
We were one of them bands, funny enough, where it would be hit, miss, miss.
Yeah.
Hit, miss, hit, So it was just the way it was with us. And it was actually the 4th song off the first album that actually really, that we got to do Top the Pops and became, an international and a really big hit. And I think in kind of hindsight, well, you never know. But we might have even got, if that song never became a hit, they tried with 4 singles.
Yeah.
And the first album, we may well
You don't know if you were on your last chance.
Yeah, we may well have been dropped. Christian came a huge hit. And then we released the Fire and Steel album, the next album, and Wishful Thinking was just like a global hit all over the place. So we started doing really, really well, which was great, for us.
Wishful Thinking, the first top 10 hit for China Crisis back in 1984. And it was the song that brought you a lot of attention and success, not just here in the UK, but internationally too. How well equipped for that success were you at the time?
At that time, we still never had a band, There was still only the two of us, me and Gary,
right,
that was signed to Virgin, who did the first 2 albums. And it was actually Virgin that turned around to us and said, you'd have an international success now. So you think that you should get the band together and go and promote, the records, the albums and that.
Right.
So it was them that really suggested it. We were first and foremost, we were kind of songwriters. And that was our backgrounds. We wrote songs in our bedrooms at home.
Yeah.
We had a little studio set up. And that's the way we would do it. And we would play the odd gig here and there. And that would be like, the servers with a tape machine or something like that.
And what was it like? What was that experience like? Because obviously when you're two lads, as you said, writing songs and playing away in your bedrooms there and dreaming of hitting the big time, when it actually happens, you know, let's do it two ways. What was brilliant? What did sort of fulfill what you hoped it would for you? And then what was the unexpected sides of it that you had no idea were part of being a famous band?
There was times when me and Gary would fall out and not speak. And we were schoolboy friends, you know.
Yeah.
But that was just constantly living in each other's pockets all the time and not having any kind of escape or whatever.
Well, and again, that's kind of a running theme, I would say, in a lot of the conversations, is that sort of, you know, people having to take quite big breaks from each other for many years at times.
Honestly, you'd not believe.
Coming back together again, but, you know, it takes its toll on the relationship, the music.
It is. I remember us recording the album Flaunting Perfection, you know, with Black Man Ray and King of the Catholic Style and all them on.
Yeah.
And we went home for something like Christmas, and we weren't getting on great or nothing. We weren't speaking that well to each other. We weren't communicating that well. And we went home for like the Christmas period, and I remember us getting the train back to go and start recording. And we were like at opposite ends of the train station. You know, couldn't even look at each other. I could see him down the other end of the train station. I was thinking, oh God, he's on his way back as well. But we get on incredibly well now.
That's hilarious.
Certainly on the exciting part was when we started really, we got the band together and we started touring really regularly. We were playing with people like Simple Minds. We played with David Bowie. We played with Santana. We made records with our heroes, you know, like Steely Dan. And we did 2 albums with Walter from Steely Dan. So there was, you know, and that one of them was on Hawaii. So we lived there for about 4 months or whatever, recording an album in George Benson's studio, you know. So there was many, many amazing times.
Talk about those collaborations you just mentioned there, working with all those people. How did that all come about?
David Bowie, funny enough, that was on the 4th album when we were doing What Price Paradise album. And that was with Langer and Winstanley. And Clive Langer had just done the Absolute Beginners album for David Bowie.
Right.
Or the record for the film, Absolute Beginners for Bowie. And we were in the studio, and he was quite friendly with Clive, Bowie and that. And Clive had mentioned that he was in producing our new album. And we were in the studio, literally, and we were into like the recreation area, you know, like playing pool or whatever.
Yeah.
And we kind of looked up, and it was like one of them, like, you know, second looks going, oh my God, David Bowie stands up there. So he came, and he really kindly came into the studio, and he listened to the album, the whole album with us that we just recorded.
Oh my goodness.
And through all the tracks with us, which was amazing, you know.
Got to number 2 in 1986, Absolute Beginners. Sharing studio space with China Crisis. Nothing like going over your latest album recording with David Bowie on Quality Control. Well, listen, before we finish up, we always ask our guests to give us a song that sort of resonates as a life lesson or a philosophy or a tune that always uplifts you, no matter how many times you put it on. What would you choose then, Eddie?
I actually chose, which was at the time was my favourite, right at the time when we would go, my favourite UK bands at that time was Talk Talk. I absolutely adored Talk Talk. I loved the Colour of Spring album. I thought they were fantastic bands. And I was not mainly influenced by American bands. I loved like Talking Heads and Steely Dan and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'd say my British bands and go-to was Talk Talk. So I chose Life What You Make It because it's very, you know, it does what it says on the tin.
Talk Talk, Life's What You Make It from 1986, our final track tonight as chosen by our special guest, Eddie London of China Crisis. Listen, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Eddie. I hope you and Gary are getting on a bit closer on the platform now.
We are, you know. No need to worry about that, Jackie, honestly.
Oh, but look, enjoy the tour. It sounds phenomenal, and I'm so pleased for you. You got to the 40th anniversary. A lot of marriages don't make it that far.
No kidding, mine included.
Oh, it turns out Gary was the love of your life.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been accused in the past of music being the love of my life.
Well, listen, we've all been the beneficiaries, so we thank you so very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was truly a pleasure. Thanks, Jackie.
Eddie London, what a great conversation that was.